Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Trust you had a good week. I interviewed Rebecca Miano, who's the managing director at KenGen earlier this week, and she was telling me she's the first female CEO since the company was created in 1954. Lots of interesting comments about where things are going there. And a lot of detail around who she is, whom she admires, and her background. Do take a listen. KenGen has been one of the best performing shares at the Securities Exchange this year. If you haven't had a chance, do look at our videos, a late evening encounter with elephants at Mazima Springs, and sunrise with a herd of elephants at Finch Hattons. Macro thoughts, here's what happened to the yen just minutes after North Korea's latest missile launch. Got as low as 109.50 before rebounding to 110.70 last. The cryptocurrency has slumped as much as 22% since September 7th, and it's slumping some more, 31.10 trading. It had risen more than fourfold this year. You will recall I did say get out of it a while back when we were just above here, about 3,700, I think, if I remember correctly. Has risen more than fourfold this year amid greater acceptance of the blockchain technology that underpins the exchange method, global political uncertainty, and increased interest in Asia. China accounts for about 23% of Bitcoin trades and is also home to many of the world's biggest Bitcoin miners who use vast amounts of computing power to confirm transactions in the digital currency. Forget $3,000 the bulls may have lost if a Bitcoin breaks 2,877. Bitcoin's more than 20% slump this week on China's reported plans to shut down cryptocurrency exchange trading has investors speculating when it will drop below the key psychological level of $3,000, currently at 3,105. But the level to watch may be just beyond that threshold of 2,877. Not only is that Bitcoin's intraday high on August 4, about the time the digital currency's most recent leg up began, it is also Bitcoin's current 100-day moving average. For Chris Weston, IG's chief market strategist in Melbourne, 2877 is a key line in the sand. The bulls will want to see this hold. Home thoughts, I like this quote from the Daily Kerouac. The closer you get to real matter, rock air, fire, and wood, boy, the more spiritual the world is. Another one, this one from Thomas Pynchon, what goes around may come around, but it never ends up exactly in the same place. You ever notice? Like a record on a turntable, all it takes is one groove's difference, and the universe can be onto a whole nother song. And one of my favorites, I dream that I've found us both again, with spring so many strangers, lives away, and we so free, out walking by the sea, with someone else's paper words to say. They took us at the gates of green return, too lost by then to stop, and asked them why do children meet again? Does any trace remain along the superhighways of July? Political reflections, Kim Jong-Un recalls Saddam and Muammar, neither of whom had a missile. I think that's a lesson he's taken to heart, and quite correctly in my view. Update, North Korea fires ballistic missile over Japan and into the Pacific. In response to new UN sanctions, it flew 2,000 kilometers over Hokkaido, the second to threaten Japan since August 29. Japan is in the crosshairs. The 4 islands of the archipelago should be sunken into the sea by the nuclear bomb of Juche. Japan is no longer needed needed to exist near us, said a spokesman earlier this week. In response to North Korea's latest missile test, South Korea immediately carried out a ballistic missile drill of its own over the East Sea. That took me again to Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, the most famous quote of all, as screaming came across the sky. It is a curve each of them feels unmistakably. It is the parabola they must have guessed, once or twice guessed, and refused to believe that everything always collectively had been moving toward that purified shape latent in the sky, that shape of no surprise, no second chance, no return. Yet they do move forever under it, reserved for its own black and white bad news, certainly as if it were the rainbow and they its children. And then taking you back to November 2010, when I wrote a piece about it that I called Far Away, called it the Hermit Kingdom. I was saying far away in distant lands lies the Hermit Kingdom. They've all had tiny little hands like the elves and the shoemaker. The first and eternal president was Kim Il-sung, and his successor Kim Jong-il, whose designated successor then was Kim Jong-Un. They've all had tiny little hands like the elves and the shoemaker. And this country has nuclear weapons, and on its border with its neighbor South Korea sit 25,000 American soldiers. Last week the North shelled the South and issued all kinds of threats. The media, and I was writing this in 2010, keeps chanting like a mantra, China will rein North Korea in. And I said, I don't think the media says it's not in their interest to have a mad dog like North Korea as an ally. And I venture this is an embedded narrative fallacy that most Western commentators are popping quaaludes. China is taking a much more forward position, and particularly in Asia, it's near abroad, and I believe North Korea is the perfect instrument, an attack dog, as it were, for China. Again, sticking with Thomas Pynchon, if they can't get you asking the wrong questions, if they can get you asking the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about the answers. No sitting president has ever lost an election in Kenya, but no such election has ever been annulled, said the Africa Confidential. What happens next will be rooted in the history of the alliances and splits in Kenya's previous presidential polls. And I'd written Supreme Court of Kenya's 4-2 decision to annul the election was an unprecedented move in Africa and the first on the continent that a court ruled against the electoral victory of an incumbent. Chief Justice David Maraga declared Kenyatta's victory invalid, null and void. This is only the fourth occasion worldwide when this has happened. Ukraine, Maldives and Austria refer. The judges ordered a new vote to be held within 60 days, given the damning nature of the verdict with respect to the IEBC. The court ruled that it had failed, neglected, or refused to conduct the presidential election in a manner consistent with the dictates of the Constitution. It is unclear to me how the 60-day deadline is met. I would recommend that we look into the marble solution a la Gambia. The court's decision was unprecedented because in such cases courts have weighed the level of malfeasance and infraction in the balance. And typically where the margin of victory is so wide, courts have taken the view that the level of infraction has not risen to a threshold which would have altered the result. Here the Supreme Court ruled on a literal and narrow constitutional basis. Interesting piece in Rolling Stone, Inside America's Secret War with ISIS, an hour before dawn on a rooftop in Raqqa. You can see the Milky Way. The Islamic State's embattled capital in Syria, once home to hundreds of thousands of people, has been bombed back into darkness. But from the city center comes the trance-like recitation of the call to prayer. A sudden flash of red light illuminates the skyline, a rumbling like distant thunder rolls over the rooftops. As soon as it subsides, the reading of scripture resumes until it is again silenced by the flash and thud of an American bomb. Since 2013, when ISIS fighters took control of Raqqa, it's been the most violent place in the world, a no-go zone where medieval punishments like beheading and crucifixion are meted out in the streets. And diseases like polio and black fever run rampant. According to a recent web post by the only remaining outfit of citizen journalists, hundreds of civilians have been killed and wounded during the past few weeks, alongside massive disruption to the city's infrastructure, residential areas, and life-sustaining utilities. The United Nations says there is no worse place on earth. For the approximately 4,000 ISIS fighters holed up in Raqqa, many of them foreign-born volunteers, there is no exit. The Euphrates River limits Raqqa on the south, and all the bridges have been destroyed. The SDF controls the countryside to the north and is now divided into two forces trying to pinch ISIS into the center of Raqqa and kill them all. Any foreign fighters here, top American liaison to the SDF, Brett McGirt, tell reporters they're going to die in Raqqa. Hillary Clinton on Trump. This is a man who engages in humiliation and domination as a tactic of control. I will not be distracted by the noise, says Ivanka Trump. To voice dissent publicly would mean I'm not part of the team. When you're part of the team, you're part of the team, she says. That doesn't mean everyone in the White House has homogenous views. We don't, and I think that's good and healthy. But that doesn't mean we're publicly undermining each other in this administration. Well, not strictly true given the amount of leaks. Saudi crown prince tries to consolidate power with string of arrests. He's launched a broad crackdown on dissent, targeting clerics, public critics, and political rivals as he moves to consolidate his newfound power amid a standoff with Qatar. It's a big risk to take these people on in such a way, but the 30-year-old crown prince has got authority from the king to do what he wants. He's faced with an impossible task, and I don't think he's up to it. Why iPhone X face recognition is cool and creepy. The feature that really got people talking was the phone's 3D facial recognition system. It's meant to allow you to log in at a glance and make your phone more secure. But some have concerns about the implications of a technology company mapping millions of people's faces and how that might be abused by companies and governments. Steve Mnuchin says the media misreported his request to use a government jet for his honeymoon. Euro dollar 119.20, dollar index 92.06, the Japanese yen, wow, 109.50 and now 110.67. So you can see that the Bank of Japan came in and lifted it back up. Swiss franc 0.9636, the pound, what a storming day yesterday, 134.30 now. Really big move. This is on the minutes that came out, which signalled that we would have a rate hike as early as this year. Australian dollar 0.7995, Indian rupee 64.095, South Korean won 1131.79, Brazilian real 31196, Egyptian pound 17.6450, and the rand softer at 13.1418. Dollar index, let me put up a 3-month chart. You know, I've been trying to look for it to bounce. I think we might be getting a bounce going, particularly after yesterday's inflation numbers. I'm getting more bullish, but very cautiously bullish. Euro dollar 119.20, falling away from those levels above 120. Commodity markets, gold is at last at 1327.50. It's been a tricky thing to trade. That run up to 1350 and come back down again when the midway point. A lot will depend on what happens over there in Pyongyang. Gold 1327.50, tricky to trade, middle of this range, 1350, 1300. Crude oil, now that popped above $50 yesterday, but it's now popped below it again at 49.90. I think we're going to see it slip back. I think that was a false break, and we should see a sharp correction today. Let's move on to Africa. African nations turn to bond markets for finance needs, says the FT. When Ghana became the first West African nation to enter the international bond markets a decade ago this month, It was part of a flurry of debt raising in the world's least developed region. Now the bills are coming due, with nearly $25 billion of sovereign debt set to mature in the region next year, according to the FT. Investors' rush into emerging market debt since the start of this year should be a boon for African finance ministers seeking to refinance. Sub-Saharan African country debt has returned 10.9%, outperformed the EM average of 9.1% this year. Stellar performances, Sergei Dergachev. However, two countries, Mozambique and Republic of the Congo, have defaulted on debt this year. Investors should differentiate between credits a lot, but the market is not differentiating. That's a fact. So let's see how things go, but these are indeed salad days for frontier market issuers. How the NSA built a secret surveillance network for Ethiopia is a very interesting piece in The Intercept. Take a look. A warm friendship connects the Ethiopian and American people. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. We remain committed to working with Ethiopia to foster liberty, democracy, economic growth, protection of human rights, and the rule of law. Behind the scenes, however, Ethiopia and the US are bound together by long-standing relationships built on far more than dairy processing equipment or health centers to treat people with HIV. 15 years ago, the US began setting up very different centers filled with technology that is not normally associated with the protection of human rights. What began as one small facility soon grew into a network of clandestine eavesdropping outposts designed to listen in on the communications of Ethiopians and their neighbors across the Horn of Africa in the name of counter-terrorism. The Ethiopian government uses surveillance not only to fight terrorism and crime, but as a key tactic in its abusive efforts to silence dissenting voices in countries, as Felix Horn. True. Interesting piece about the Kasai conflict, mass graves, missing bodies, and mysticism inside Congo's spiraling Kasai conflict. Nobody knows how many bodies are buried here. Only that the Congolese soldiers said to be responsible for the killing showed no mercy when they entered the neighborhood back in March, searching for members of a militia known as Kamuaina Nsapu. Among the sandy side streets and soaring palm trees, they left behind a trail of destruction, still visible months later: charred huts, bones poking through the dust, blood-stained walls, and stories of civilians gunned down in their homes. Terrible story. What began as a local conflict in one small part of Kasai Central has spread like wildfire, with villages from across the 5 provinces of Greater Kasai mobilizing fighters, all under the name of Kumaina Nsapu. South African opposition sets its sights on McKinsey and KPMG. Instead of raising the alarm, these companies seem to have played along. The firms undermine South African laws in pursuit of profit. South African all shares up 10.26% year to date. Dollar versus rand, we've been softening up a little bit on the rand. We're at 13.1418. Egyptian pound, I think, has found an equilibrium price, 17.6450. Nigerian all shares up 32.69% this year. The Ghana Stock Exchange is up 37.08% this year. I like this piece about art in the Congo from The Economist. I was born with drawing, he announces. I did not learn it. I had it in my blood. The Kenyan opposition has set preconditions for a credible election redo, that it was necessary for a rerun of last month's annulled presidential vote to be credible, as it accused the electoral authority of preparing another sham election. The conditions include replacing personnel at the IEBC who abetted fraud, live media coverage of results declarations at the country's 290 constituency tallying centres, NASA co-leader Musalia Mudavadi told reporters Thursday in Nairobi. The opposition alliance led by Raila Odinga has threatened to call supporters onto the streets to prevent the rerun from taking place if the chief executive officer of the commission refuses to step down. The commission on Monday signalled it won't change its executive body announcing that it was one team with a common vision and that this will handle the election, with CEO Ezra Chiloba being charged with assessing the implementation challenges in August's vote. I'm beginning to expect the opposition to boycott this election because my calculations are showing that the government will win even bigger this time round. In part, that's a turnout calculation, motivation calculation, and I think incumbent has the power to pick his spots far more than the opposition does. The Central Bank of Kenya's options are hamstrung by the emergence of political risk. This is Gibran Qureshi. When you have prolonged political uncertainty, one of the biggest concerns is whether there would be any risk to the exchange rate. Currently, there is no reason for them to do anything differently. East Africa's largest economy has struggled to gain any real momentum after the first quarter and will move on a downward trajectory this year, said David Cowan at Citi. Government forecasts expansion of 5.5% this year. GDP may rise by less than 5%, says Cowan. The real question about where the economy goes into 2018 is unresolved, given the new political uncertainty will now cast its shadow over much of the second half of 2017, and I wrote about this on the 4th of September in a piece called Court Ruling Impacts Economy. And there I was saying that political uncertainty could easily last the rest of the year. Barclays Kenya sees Kenya's banks rushing to raise debt to boost capital. The IFRS Standard 9 or IFRS 9 that comes into effect on January the 1st requires banks to set aside more provisions for expected losses even before loan quality deteriorates, rather than when an actual default occurs. This will increase impairments for the lenders and force them to raise fresh capital through debt. In certain instances, depending upon the quality of their books and level of impairment, they may have to raise more capital, said Jeremy Awori. They'll have to go to the capital markets. Barclays is comfortable with its core capital. Banks could have to pay more than the 14% prevailing commercial interest rate when raising debt, and a 5-year corporate bond by East African breweries issued earlier this year has anything to go by, which is an interesting point. And Awori also said it doesn't matter who's in government, the status quo cannot remain, because even if it's popular, even if people desire it to remain in place, certain fundamentals will have their impact. This is part of the conversation we were having yesterday at the RedCap investor briefing, which I participated, where he said exactly that. IFRS is going to be a game changer. Barclays is up 24.72% on a total return basis this year, and reported first half profit after tax declined 13.3%. Nairobi All Shares up 23.35% year to date. NSE 20 is up 19.7% year to date. And I wish you all a tremendous weekend.